Welcome to a quick overview of the Sorcerer skill lines and the Destruction Staff skill line. So let's dive right in with the Dark Magic skill line. Your ultimate is Negate Magic, which morphs into Absorption Field or Suppression Field. Primary purpose of this is to get rid of enemy effects that are on the ground. The morphs give you either a heal while you're standing in it or significant damage on the enemies that you can catch in it. Primarily used when you know what the enemy is going to be throwing at you and you need to get rid of the ground-based stuff. Otherwise, there's usually better ultimates. Crystal Fragments is the morph of Crystal Shards. Technically, there is another one called Crystal Blast, but it stinks by comparison. Crystal Fragments is amazing and is the one you should always take. Encase morphs into Restraining and Shattering Prison. It's your AoE Immobilize. Nice in theory, rarely will you be able to fit it onto your bar. Even more so, Rune Prison, which morphs into Rune Cage and Defensive Rune. Outside of maybe a PvP use, this is one you're probably never going to use. Dark Exchange, on the other hand, though, can find its way in currently and will probably find its way in more often in the future because it's a way of getting back resources, and resources are going to be becoming more scarce as we go forward. Daedric Mines gives you another ground-based AoE damage. Again, primarily useful in PvP where you can restrict where people go, but also useful in PvE. Again, may not find some space in your bar. Standard rule of passives, take all of them. They're all useful and all good. Unholy Knowledge reduces the costs of your abilities. Good now, even more important later. Blood Magic heals you when you use damaging dark magic powers, aka Crystal Fragments. Persistence increases the duration. It's if you're using Encase, so not so likely. And then Exploitation gives you Minor Prophecy, which isn't that easy to find otherwise, and it applies to your whole group, so that's wonderful. Daedric Summoning. Storm Atronach basically summons another pet for you that does some significant damage. The Unstable Familiar morphs into either the Volatile Familiar, which can do AoE damage for you, or the Unstable Clan Fear, which can tank for you and heal. Starting out, I like to work with the Unstable Clan Fear because it's a way to heal yourself that's not reliant on a resto bar, and the heal is pretty significant. And the Clan Fear can take aggro that would otherwise be coming at you. So if you run up to 3 guys, the Clan Fear will take usually 1 or 2 of them off you, which is great. Daedric Prey is one of the morphs from Daedric Curse. This is a damage after time power. Haunting Curse is the most efficient use of it, where it hurts the enemy and then hurts them again. Daedric Prey is for a pet build, which is what Mockery's set up with now. Lets the pets do 55% extra damage, which is enormous. Winged Twilight goes into either Tormentor, which is more damage, or Twilight Matriarch, which has a phenomenal heal, better than Templar Breath of Life, because it hits 2 targets for full strength. Also, the Twilight herself is plinking away with damage, so that's great. One of the crown jewels of Sorcerer powers is Conjured Ward, morphs into Hardened Ward or Empowered Ward. The size of this ward is enormous, can exceed your hit point bar. So this can make you tanky as all get out. Bound Armor morphs into Bound Aegis or Bound Armaments, increases your max Magicka or max stamina by 8%. Again, that's good enough to double bar it. The passive abilities, Rebate, get you some magic back if a pet dies, great for resummoning them. Power Stone just flat reduces the cost of ultimate abilities, not just sorcerer abilities, all ultimate abilities, so that's nice. Daedric Protection, a little bit more health and stamina recovery if you have a Daedric Summon ability out. Remember, Hardened Ward is a summoning ability, so that gets you this. Expert Summoner, max health by 8%, and that's specifically Daedric Summoning Pet, so it has to be the Twilight, the Clan Fear here, or the Atronach. Storm Calling is your last one. The Overload Ultimate is great. It gives you a 3rd bar to work with, so you can have a 3rd set of abilities, 15 rather than 10, basically, or 18 rather than 12. Also, if you morph it to Energy Overload, your light and heavy attacks will restore magic to you. So you can run your magic down, building up your ultimate in the process, Energy Overload, restore your magic, lowering your ultimate ability, and basically toggle back and forth between the two. Mage's Wrath is your Execute. It's one of the weaker ones in that it only starts working at under 20%. Its advantage, though, is it does do AoE damage, so if you've got a boss and adds, that's great. But basically, don't use this until they hit 20%. Boundless Storm, great for stamina. Sorcerers, Hurricane is amazing. Boundless Storm itself, kind of meh, so you're probably not going to use it. Lightning Flood, on the other hand, is the morph from Lightning Splash, and it's amazing. Your choice is basically more duration or more area. Power Surge is where you get your Major Brutality, Major Sorcery from. And the criticals, it makes it so that when you deal a critical, you heal back your health. This has been enough to see me through soloing dungeons, so it's stronger than you might think. And Streak is great. It lets you move around quickly. Again, one that's hard to fit on the bar, but in certain instances definitely useful, especially in PvP. Capacitor increases magic recovery. Straightforward. Physical and shock damage to support whichever way you're taking your Sorcerer. And again, Implosion. Basically, it's like an extra execute. At below 50% health, there's a chance that you'll just do a bunch of extra damage to them. And then Expert Mage, more spell damage and weapon damage for each sorcerer ability you have slotted. So you might tip into Restoration Staff a little bit. You might use Dual Wield for the Twin Blade and Blunt, but we'll just look at Destruction Staff real quick. Elemental Storm unlocks when you get to 50 in Destruction Staff, that is, but it's worth the wait. It's really good. Force Shock morphs into either Force Pulse, which does more damage, or Crushing Shock, which can interrupt people. I like Crushing Shock, especially when you're starting out in soloing, because sometimes you just have to interrupt that guy who's way over there. Unstable Wall comes from Wall of Elements, or it could be Elemental Blockade. One of the best DOTs in the game. Destructive Touch. Again, it's one that's nice, but probably won't fit on your bar. You'll probably be using Force Shock instead of that. Weakness to Elements by itself reduces resistance to magic damage, so it's increasing your damage. And if you morph it to Elemental Drain, it applies Minor Magic Steal, which will become more important in the future as resources become harder to come by. Impulse morphs to Pulsar Elemental Ring. This is your basically spammable AoE. The problem is you've probably got a lot of other powers, so it's hard to fit this one on. And in the cases where you can fit this on, you're probably going to burn your magic out pretty quickly by spamming it. Trifocus highlights something about Destruction Staffs. Flame deals extra damage. Single target shock deals extra damage to multiple enemies, and Frost is basically now for tanking. So Penetrating Magic is straightforward. It just reduces spells or ignores spell resistance, so you do more damage. More chance of status effects is important, especially Concussion, which can set people off balance. There's a champion point passive you can get that does 10% extra damage to off-balance targets. That includes bosses, so this one's pretty key. Ancient Knowledge, basically Flame, straight 8% to single target buff, Lightning, straight 8% to AoE buff, and Frost is for tanks only. Reduces cost of blocking and increases damage, and then Destruction Expert gets you back Magicka if you kill things with the Destruction Staff, which is pretty handy. So that's a quick overview of Sorcerer and Destruction Staff. Hopefully it was useful, and I'll talk to you later.